Hello, everyone, and welcome. Sorry it took me a sec. I had to pee. Anyway, there we go. Today we will be reading some poems, and hopefully it will be relaxing and shit. Cool. Anyway, let's just go, I guess. Our first poem will be the love song J. Alfred Prufrock by T.S. Eliot. Let us go then, you and I, when the evening is spread out against the sky, like a patient etherized upon a table. Hey, Knifehang, what's up? How's it going? Let us go through certain. Let us go through certain half-deserted streets, the muttering retreats of restless nights in one-night cheap hotels, in sawdust restaurants with oyster shells, streets that follow like a tedious argument of insidious intent to lead you to an overwhelming question. Oh, do not ask, what is it? Let us go and make our visit. In the room, the women come and go, talking of Michelangelo. The yellow fog that rubs its back upon the window panes. What's good? Slow can be good. I had a very busy day. Uh, the yellow smoke that rubs its muzzle on the window panes, licked its tongue into the corners of the evening, lingered upon the pools that stand in drains, let fall upon its back the soot that falls from chimneys, slipped by the terrace, made a sudden leap, and seeing that it was a soft October night, curled once about the house and fell asleep. And indeed there will be time for the yellow smoke that slides along the street, rubbing its back upon the window panes. There will be time, there will be time to prepare a face to meet the faces that you meet. There will be time to murder and create, and time for all the works and days of hands that lift and drop a question on your plate. Time for you, and time for me, and time yet for 100 indecisions, and for 100 visions and revisions, before the taking of a toast and tea. In the room, the women come and go, talking of Michelangelo. And indeed, there will be time to wonder, do I dare, and do I dare? Time to turn back and descend the stair, with a bald spot in the middle of my hair. They will say how his hair is growing thin, my morning coat, my collar mounting firmly to the chin, my necktie rich and modest, but asserted by a simple pin. They will say, but how his arms and legs are thin. Do I dare disturb the universe? In a minute there is time for decisions and revisions, which a minute will reverse. For I have known them all already, known them all, have known the evenings, mornings, afternoons. I have measured out my life with coffee spoons. I know the voices dying with a dying fall, beneath the music from a farther room. So how should I presume? Hey Bucky, what's up? And I have known the eyes already, known them all, the eyes that fix you in a formulated phrase. And when I am formulated, sprawling on a pen, when I am pinned and wriggling on the wall, then how should I begin? To spit out all the butt ends of my days and ways, and how should I presume? And I have known the arms already, known them all, arms that are braceleted and white and bare, but in the lamplight, downed with light brown hair. Is it perfume from a dress that makes me so digress? Arms that lie along a table or wrap about a shawl. And should I then presume? And how should I begin? I'm going to take off my headphones because I guess I don't really need them for this. Just in case, I'm going to mute the line out. Okay. Shall I say, I have gone at dusk through narrow streets and watched the smoke that rises from the pipes of lonely men in shirt sleeves leaning out of windows. I should have been a pair of ragged claws scuttling across the floors of silent seas. And the afternoon, the evening sleeps so peacefully, smoothed by long fingers, asleep, tired, or it malingers, stretched on the floor, here beside you and me. Should I, after tea and cakes and ices, have the strength to force the moment to its crisis? But though I have wept and fasted, wept and prayed, though I have seen my head, grown slightly bald, brought in upon a platter, I am no prophet, and here's no great matter. I, I have seen the moment of my greatness flicker, and I have seen the eternal footman hold my coat and snicker, and in short, I was afraid. And would it have been worth it after all, after the cups, the marmalade, the tea, among the porcelain, among some talk of you and me? Would it have been worth while to have bitten off the matter with a smile, to have squeezed the universe into a ball, to roll it towards some overwhelming question, to say, I am Lazarus, come from the dead, I'm back to tell you all, I shall tell you all. If one, settling a pillow by her head, should say, that is not what I meant at all, that is not it at all. And would it have been worth it after all? Would it have been worth while, after the sunsets and the dooryards and the sprinkled streets, after the novels, after the teacups, after the skirts that trail along the floor, and this and so much more? It is impossible to say just what I mean, but as if a magic lantern threw the nerves and patterns on a screen, would it have been worth while if one, settling a pillow or throwing off a shawl and turning toward the window, should say, that is not it at all, that is not what I meant at all? No, I am not Prince Hamlet, nor was meant to be. Am an attendant lord, one that will do, to swell a progress, start a scene or two, advise the prince, no doubt, an easy tool, differential, glad to be of use, politic, I guess it would be politic, actually, cautious and meticulous, full of high sentence, but a bit obtuse, at times, indeed, almost ridiculous, almost, at times, the fool. I grow old, I grow old. I shall wear the bottoms of my trousers rolled. Shall I part my hair behind? do I dare to eat a peach? Um, I shall wear white flannel trousers and walk upon the beach. I have heard the mermaids singing, each to each. I do not think that they will sing to me. I have seen them riding seaward on the waves, combing the white hair of the waves blown back. When the wind blows the water white and black, we have lingered in the chambers of the sea, by sea girls wreathed with seaweed red and brown, till human voices wake us and we drown. That was The Love Song of J. Alfred Prufrock by T.S. Eliot. Next up are a few poems from my favorite poet, E. E. Cummings. Hey, Era, what's up? How's it going? This one is May I Feel, said he. May I feel, said he. I'll squeal, said she. Just once, said he. It's fun, said she. May I touch, said he. How much, said she. A lot, said he. Why not, said she. Let's go, said he. Not too far, said she. What's too far, said he. Where you are, said she. May I stay, said he. Which way, said she. Like this, said he. If you kiss, said she. May I move, said he. Is it love, said she. If you're willing, said he. But you're killing, said she. But it's life, said he. But your wife, said she. Now, said he. Ow, said she. Tip top, said he. Don't stop, said she. Oh no, said he. Go slow, said she. Come, said he. Said she. You're divine, said he. You are mine, said she. What you reading, Ara? I hope it's cool. That was May I Feel, said he by E. Cummings. Alright. This is A Man Who Had Fallen Among Thieves, also by E. Cummings. A man who had fallen among thieves lay by the roadside on his back, dressed in 15th rate ideas, wearing a round jeer for a hat. Fate, per somewhat more than less, emancipated evening, had in return for consciousness endowed him with a changeless grin, whereon a dozen staunch and leal citizens did graze at pause, then fired at hypercivic zeal, sought newer pastures or because, swaddled with a frozen brook, pinkest vomit out of eyes, which noticed nobody he looked, as if he did not care to rise. One hand did nothing on the vest, its wide-flung friend clenched weakly dirt, while the mute trouser fly confessed, a button solemnly inert, brushing from whom the stiffened puke. I put him all into my arms, and staggered, banged with terror through a million billion trillion stars. Sounds interesting. I hope it goes well for that guy. Alright. This is Dying is Fine But Death by E. E. Cummings. Dying is fine, but death, oh baby, I wouldn't like death if death were good, for when, instead of stopping to think, you begin to feel of it, dying's miraculous. Why? Because dying is perfectly natural, perfectly putting it mildly lively, but Death is strictly scientific and artificial and evil and legal. We thank thee, God Almighty, for dying. Forgive us, O life, the sin of death. This is a good example of E. Cummings and the way he liked to turn his poems into a sort of visual art as well. A light out. A light out, and first of all foam, like hair spatters creasing pillow, next everywhere hidingly seek. No, oh God, dear, wait, shh, please, oh no, oh. Bird findingest whispers understand, sobs bigly climb what, love being something possibly more intricate. I, breath and breath, have nicknamed ecstasy and spills smile cheaply thick, who therefore thee, once and once only, queen among centuries, universes between, who out of deepliness rose to undeath, salute, and having worshipped for my doom, pass ignorantly into sleep's bright land. L.A. L parenthesis A. A leaf falls in loneliness. All right. That's all of the E. Cummings poems, for now at least. Next we have Goblin Market by Christina Rossetti, a personal favorite. Morning and evening, maids heard the goblins cry, come buy our orchard fruits, come buy, come buy. Apples and quinces, lemons and oranges, plump unpecked cherries, melons and raspberries, bloom down cheeked peaches, swart headed mulberries, wild freeborn cranberries, crab apples, dewberries, pineapples, blackberries, apricots, strawberries, all ripe together in summer weather. Morns that pass by, fair eves that fly, come by, come by. Our grapes fresh from the vine, pomegranates full and fine, dates and sharp pouluses, rare pears and green gages, damsons and bilberries, taste them and try, currants and gooseberries, bright fire like barberries, figs to fill your mouth, citrons from the south, sweet to the tongue and sound to eye, come by, come by. Evening by evening, among the brookside rushes, Laura bowed her head to hear, Lizzie veiled her blushes, crouching close together in the cooling weather, with clasping arms and cautioning lips, with tingling cheeks and fingertips. Lie close, Laura said, pricking up her golden head. We must not look at goblin men. We must not buy their fruits. Who knows upon what soil they fed their hungry, thirsty roots? Come by, call the goblins, hobbling down the glen. Oh, cried Lizzie, Laura, Laura, you should not peep at goblin men. Lizzie covered up her eyes, covered close, lest they should look. Laura reared her glossy head, and whispered like the restless brook, look, Lizzie, down the glen tramp little men. One hauls a basket, one bears a plate, one lugs a golden dish of many pounds weight. How fair the vine must grow, whose grapes are so luscious. How warm the wind must blow through those fruit bushes. No, said Lizzie. No, no, no. Their offers should not charm us. Their evil gifts would harm us. She thrust a dimpled finger in each ear, shut eyes and ran. Curious Laura chose to linger, wondering at each merchant man. One had a cat's face, one whisked a tail, one tramped at a rat's pace, one crawled like a snail, one like a wombat proud obtuse and furry, one like a rattle tumbled hurry-scurry. She heard a voice like voice of doves, cooing all together. They sounded kind and full of loves in the pleasant weather. Laura stretched her gleaming neck like a rush-embedded swan, like a lily from the beck, like a moonlit poplar branch, like a vessel at the launch when its last restraint is gone. Backwards up the mossy glen turned and trooped the goblin men, with their shrill repeated cry, "Come by, come by." When they reached where Laura was, they stood stock still upon the moss, leering at each other, brother with queer brother, signaling each other, brother with sly brother. One set his basket down, one reared his plate, one began to weave a crown of tendrils, leaves, and rough nuts brown. Men sell not such in any town. One heaved the golden weight of dish and fruit to offer her. Come by, was still their cry. Laura stared, but did not stir, longed, but had no money. The whisk-tailed merchant bade her taste, in tones as smooth as honey. The cat-faced purred, the rat-faced spoke a word of welcome, and the snail-paced even was heard. One parrot-voiced and jolly cried, "Pretty goblin," still for "Pretty Polly." One whistled like a bird. But sweet-toothed Laura spoke in haste. "Good folk, I have no coin to take or to purloin. I have no copper in my purse, I have no silver either, and all my gold is on the furze that shakes in windy weather above the rusty heather." "You have much gold upon your head," they answered all together. "Buy from us with a golden curl." She clipped a precious golden lock. She dropped a tear more rare than pearl, then sucked their fruit globes fair or red, sweeter than honey from the rock, stronger than man rejoicing wine. Clearer than water flowed that juice. She never tasted such before. How should it cloy with length of use? She sucked and sucked and sucked the more, fruits which that unknown orchard bore. She sucked until her lips were sore, then flung the emptied rinds away, but gathered up one kernel stone, and knew not was it night or day, as she turned home alone. Lizzie met her at the gate, full of wise upbraidings. "Dear, you should not stay so late. Twilight is not good for maidens. Should not loiter in the glen, in the haunts of goblin men. Do you not remember Jeanie, how she met them in the moonlight, took their gifts, both choice and many, ate their fruits and wore their flowers, plucked from bowers, where summer ripens at all hours? But ever in the moonlight, but ever in the noonlight, she pined and pined away, sought them by night and day, found them no more, but dwindled and grew gray. then fell with the first snow, while to this day no grass will grow where she lies low. I planted daisies there a year ago that never blow. You should not loiter so. Nay, hush, said Laura. Nay, hush, my sister. I ate and ate my fill, yet my mouth waters still. Tomorrow night I will buy more, and kissed her. I've done with sorrow. I'll bring you plums tomorrow, fresh on their mother twigs. Cherries worth getting. You cannot think what figs my teeth have met in. What melons icy cold, piled on a dish of gold, too huge for me to hold. What peaches with a velvet nap, pellucid, actually don't know how to pronounce that word, pellucid grapes without one seed. Odorous indeed must be the mead, whereon they grow, and pure the wave they drink, with lilies at the brink, and sugar sweet their sap. Golden head by golden head, like two pigeons in one nest, folded in each other's wings, they lay down in their curtained bed, like two blossoms. I looked away and lost my place. Like two blossoms on one stem, like two flakes of new fallen snow, like two wands of ivory, tipped with gold for awful kings. Moon and stars gazed in at them, wind sang to them lullaby, lumbering owls forbore to fly, not a bat flapped to and fro, round their rest. Cheek to cheek and breast to breast, locked together in one nest. Early in the morning, when the first cock crowed his warning, neat like bees, as sweet and busy, Laura rose with Lizzie, fetched in honey, milked the cows, aired and set to rights the house, kneaded cakes of whitest wheat, cakes for dainty mouths to eat. Next churned butter, whipped up cream, fed their poultry, sat and sewed, talked as modest maidens should, Lizzie with an open heart, Laura in an absent dream, one content, one sick in part, one warbling for the mere bright day's delight, one longing for the night. At length slow evening came. They went with pitchers to the reedy brook, Lizzie most placid in her look, Laura most like a leaping flame. They drew the gurgling water from its deep. Lizzie plucked purple and rich golden flowers, then turning homeward said, the sunset flushes those furthest loftiest crags. Come, Laura, not another maiden lags, no wilful squirrel wags, the beasts and birds are fast asleep, but Laura loitered still among the rushes and sank the bank and said the bank was steep, and said the hour was early still, the dew not fallen, the wind not chill, listening ever, but not watching the customary cry, come by, with its iterated jingle of sugar-baited words, not for all her watching, once discerning even one goblin, racing, whisking, tumbling, hobbling, let alone the herds they used to tramp along the glen, in groups or single, of brisk fruit merchant men. Till Lizzie urged, O Laura, come. I hear the fruit call, but I dare not look. You should not loiter longer at this brook. Come with me home. The stars rise, the moon bends her arc, each glowworm winks her spark. Let us get home before the night grows dark, for clouds may gather, Though this is summer weather, put out the lights and drench us through. Then if we lost our way, what should we do? Laura turned cold as stone to find her sister heard that cry alone, that goblin cry, come buy our fruits, come buy. Must she then buy no more such dainty fruit? Must she no more such succous pasture find, gone deaf and blind? Her tree of life drooped from the root. She said not one word in her heart's sore ache, but peering through the dimness, not discerning, trudged home, her pitcher dripping all the way. So crept to bed and lay, silent, till Lizzie slept, and sat up in a passionate yearning, and gnashed her teeth for balked desire, and wept as if her heart would break. Day after day, night after night, Laura kept watch in vain. In sullen silence of exceeding pain, she never caught again the goblin cry, come buy, come buy. She never spied the goblin men plucking their fruits along the glen, but when the noon waxed bright, her hair grew thin and grey. She dwindled as the fair full moon doth turn to swift decay and burn her fire away. One day, remembering her kernel stone, she set it by a wall that faced the south, dewed it with tears, hoped for a root, watched for a waxing shoot, but there came none. It never saw the sun. It never felt the trickling moisture run, while with sunk eyes and faded mouth, she dreamed of melons as a traveler sees false waves in desert drouth, with shade of leaf-crowned trees, and burns the thirstier in the sandful breeze. She no more swept the house, tended the fowls or cows, fetched honey, kneaded cakes of wheat, brought water from the brook, but sat down listless in the chimney nook and would not eat. Tender Lizzie could not bear to watch her sister's cankerous care, yet not to share. She night and morning caught the goblin's cry, come buy our orchard fruits, come buy, come buy. Beside the brook, along the glen, she heard the tramp of goblin men, the yoke and stir, for Laura could not hear, longed to buy fruit to comfort her, but feared to pay too dear. She thought of Jeanie in her grave, who should have been a bride, but who for joys brides hope to have, fell sick and died, in her gay prime, in earliest winter time, with the first glazing rime, with the first snowfall of crisp winter time. Till Laura dwindling seemed knocking at death's door, then Lizzie weighed no more, better or worse, but put a silver penny in her purse, kissed Laura, crossed the heath with clumps of firs, at twilight halted by the brook, and for the first time in her life began to listen and look. Laughed every goblin when they spied her peeping, came towards her hobbling, flying, running, leaping, puffing and blowing, chuckling, clapping, crowing, clucking and gobbling, mopping and mowing, full of airs and graces, pulling wry faces, demure grimaces, cat-like and rat-like, rattle and wombat-like, snail-paced in a hurry, parrot-voiced and whistler, helter-skelter, hurry-scurry, chattering like magpies, fluttering like pigeons, gliding like fishes, hugged her and kissed her, squeezed and caressed her, stretched up their dishes, panniers and plates. Look at our apples, russet and dun, bob at our cherries, bite at our peaches, citrons and dates, Grapes for the asking, pears red with basking, out in the sun, plums on their twigs, pluck them and suck them, pomegranates, figs. Good folk, said Lizzie, mindful of Jeanie, give me much and many, held out her apron, tossed them her penny. Nay, take a seat with us, honour and eat with us, they answered grinning. Our feast is but beginning. Night yet is early, warm and dew pearly, wakeful and starry. Such fruits as these no man can carry. Half their bloom would fly, half their dew would dry, half their flavour would pass by. Sit down and feast with us. Be welcome, guest with us. Cheer you and rest with us. Thank you, said Lizzie, but one waits at home alone for me. So without further parleying, if you will not sell me any of your fruits, though much and many, give me back my silver penny I tossed you for a fee. They began to scratch their pates, no longer wagging, purring, but visibly demurring, grunting and snarling. One called her proud, cross-grained, uncivil. Their tones waxed loud, their looks were evil. Lashing their tails, they trod and hustled her, elbowed and jostled her, clawed with their nails, barking, mewing, hissing, mocking, tore her gown and soiled her stocking, twitched her hair out by the roots, stamped upon her tender feet, held her hands and squeezed their fruits against her mouth to make her eat. White and golden Lizzie stood, like a lily in a flood, like a rock of blue-veined stone, lashed by tides obstreperously, like a beacon left alone in a hoary raging sea, sending up a golden fire, like a fruit-crowned orange tree, white with blossoms honey sweet, sore beset by wasp and bee, like a royal virgin town, topped with gilded dome and spire, close beleaguered by a fleet, mad to tug her standard down. One may lead a horse to water, 20 cannot make him drink. Though the goblins cuffed and caught her, coaxed and fought her, bullied and besought her, scratched her, pinched her black as ink, kicked and knocked her, mauled and mocked her, Lizzie uttered not a word, would not open lip from lip, lest they should cram a mouthful, but laughed in heart to feel the drip of juice that syruped all her face, and lodged in dimples of her chin, and streaked her neck which quaked like curd. At last the evil people, worn out by her resistance, flung back her penny, kicked their fruit, along whichever road they took, not leaving root or stone or shoot. Some writhed into the ground, some dived into the brook, with ring and ripple. Some scudded on the gale without a sound, some vanished in the distance. In a smart ache tingle, Lizzie went her way, knew not was it night or day, sprang up the brook, tore through the firs, threaded copse and dingle, and heard her penny jingle, bouncing in her purse. Its bounce was music to her ear. She ran and ran, as if she feared some goblin man dogged her with gibe or curse, or something worse. But not one goblin scurried after, nor was she pricked by fear. The kind heart made her windy paced, that urged her home quite out of breath with haste, and inward laughter. She cried, Laura, up the garden, did you miss me? Come and kiss me. Never mind my bruises. Hug me, kiss me, suck my juices. Squeezed from goblin fruits for you, goblin pulp and goblin dew. Eat me, drink me, love me. Laura, make much of me. For your sake I have braved the glen, and had to do with goblin merchantmen. Laura started from her chair, flung her arms up in the air, clutched her hair. Lizzie, Lizzie, have you tasted, for my sake, the forbidden fruit? Must your light like mine be hidden, your young life like mine be wasted, undone in mine undoing, and ruined in my ruin? Thirsty, cankered, goblin ridden, she clung about her sister, kissed and kissed and kissed her. Tears once again refreshed her sunken eyes, dropping like rain after long sultry drought. Shaking with shaking with aguish fear and pain, she kissed and kissed her with a hungry mouth. Her lips began to scorch, that juice was wormwood to her tongue. She loathed to feast. Writhing as one possessed, she leaped and sung, rent all her robe and wrung her hands in lamentable haste, and beat her breast. Her locks streamed like the torch borne by a racer at full speed, or like the mane of horses in their flight, or like an eagle when she stems the light straight toward the sun, or like a caged thing freed, or like a flying flag with armies run. Swift fire spread through her veins, knocked at her heart, met the fire smoldering there, and overbore its lesser flame. She gorged on bitterness without a name. Ah, fool to choose such part of soul consuming care, sense failed in the mortal strife, like the watchtower of a town, which an earthquake shatters down, like a lightning stricken mast, like a wind uprooted tree, spun about, like a foam topped waterspout, cast down headlong into the sea. She fell at last, pleasure past and anguish past. Is it death or is it life? Life out of death. That night long Lizzie watched by her, counted her pulses' flagging stir, felt for her breath, held water to her lips and cooled her face with tears and fanning leaves. And when the first birds chirped about their eaves, and early reapers plodded to the place of golden sheaves and dew-wet grass, bowed in the morning winds so brisk to pass, and new buds with new day opened of cup like lilies on the stream, Laura awoke as if from a dream, laughed in the innocent old way, hugged Lizzie, but not twice or thrice. Her gleaming locks showed not one thread of gray. Her breath was sweet as May, and light danced in her eyes. Days, weeks, months, years, afterwards, when both were wives, with children of their own, their mother hearts beset with fears, their lives bound up in tender lives, Laura would call the little ones and tell them of her early prime, those pleasant days long gone, of not returning time, would talk about the haunted glen, the wicked, quaint fruit merchantmen, their fruits like honey to the throat, but poison in the blood. Men sell not such in any town. Would tell them how her sister stood in deadly peril to do her good, and when the fiery antidote, then joining hands to little hands, would bid them cling together. And there is no friend, for there is no friend like a sister, in calm or stormy weather, to cheer one on the tedious way, to fetch one if one goes astray, to lift one if one totters down, to strengthen whilst one stands. It was Goblin Party by Christina Rossetti. Next up is Dreamland, also by Christina Rossetti. Where sunless rivers weep their waves into the deep, she sleeps a charmed sleep awake her not, led by a single star. She came from very far, to seek where shadows are, her pleasant lot. She left the rosy morn, she left the fields of corn, and for twilight cold and lorn, in winter springs. Through sleep as through sleep as through a veil, she sees the sky look pale, and hears the nightingale that sadly sings. Rest, rest, a perfect rest, shed over brow and breast. Her face is toward the west, the purple land. She cannot see the grain ripening on hill and plain. She cannot feel the rain upon her hand. Rest, rest forevermore upon a mossy shore. Rest, rest at the heart's core till time shall cease. Sleep that no pain shall wake, night that no morn shall break, till joy shall overtake her perfect peace. Yeah, Christina Rossetti's really good. I like her stuff a lot. No, Thank You, John, also by Christina Rossetti. I never said I loved you, John. Why will you tease me day by day, and wax a weariness to think upon, with always do and pray? You know I never loved you, John. No fault of mine made me your toast. Why will you haunt me with a face as wan as shows an hour-old ghost? I dare say Meg or Moll will take pity upon you if you'd ask. And pray don't remain single for my sake, who can't perform that task. I have no heart, perhaps I have not, but then you're mad to take offense that I don't give you what I have not got. Use your common sense. Let bygones be bygones. Don't call me false who owed not to be true. I'd rather answer no to 50 Johns than answer yes to you. Let's mar our pleasant days no more, songbirds of passage, days of youth. Catch at today, forget the days before, I'll wink at your untruth. Let us strike hands as hearty friends, no more, no less, a friendship's good. Only don't keep in view ulterior ends and points not understood. In open treaty, rise above, quibbles and shuffling off and on. Here's friendship for you if you like, but love? No, thank you, John. Get fucking friend zone, John, you little bitch. Okay. Now we're moving on to Shakaspar. This one everyone knows. I assume everyone probably knows all of these, honestly. Let me get a drink real quick. I just noticed a poem that I forgot to add to this, but thank you for it being there. Shall I compare thee to a summer's day? Thou art more lovely and more temperate. Rough winds do shake the darling buds of May, and summer's lease hath all too short a date. Some time too hot the eye of heaven shines, and often is his gold complexion dimmed. And every fair from fair some time declines, by chance or nature's changing course untrimmed. But thy eternal summer shall not fade, nor lose possession of that fair thou owest. Nor shall death brag thou wanderest in his shade, when in eternal lines to time thou growest. So long as men can breathe, or eyes can see, so long lives this, and this gives life to thee. Shakespeare, oh, that's Sonnet 18. That's, okay. Couldn't remember which one it was. All right. All the world's a stage. All the world's a stage, and all the men and women merely players, to have their exits and their entrances, and one man in his time plays many parts, his acts being 7 ages. At first, the infant, mewling and puking in the nurse's arms, then the whining schoolboy with his satchel and shining morning face, creeping like snail, unwillingly to school, and then the lover, sighing like furnace with a woeful ballad made to his mistress's eyebrow, then a soldier, full of strange oaths and bearded like the pard, jealous in honor, sudden and quick in quarrel, seeking the bubble reputation, even in the cannon's mouth, and then the justice, in fair round belly with good capon lined, with eye severe and beard of formal cut, full of wise saws and modern instances. And so he plays his part. The sixth age shifts into the lean and slippered pantaloon, with spectacles on nose and pouch on side, his youthful hose, well saved, a world too wide for his shrunk shank, and his big manly voice, turning again toward childish treble, pipes and whistles in his sound. Last scene of all, that ends his strange eventful history, his second childishness and mere oblivion, sans teeth, sans eyes, sans taste, sans everything. 1996 Romeo and Juliet. Oh, yeah, that one's really good. Is that the one where they're speaking in Romeo and Shakespeare, but like it's, they're like shooting guns and shit? I assume that's the one you mean. That one's great. All right. A fairy song by Shakespeare. Over hill, over dale, thorough bush, thorough briar, over park, over pale, thorough flood, thorough fire. I do wander everywhere, swifter than the moon's sphere, and and I serve the fairy queen to do her orbs upon the green. The cowslips tall her pensioners be, in their gold coats spots you see. Those be rubies, fairy favors. In those freckles live their saviors. I must go seek some dewdrops here, and hang a pearl in every cowslip's ear. All right, now we're on to Robert Frost's another fave. Mending wall. Something there is that doesn't love a wall, that sends the frozen ground to swell under it, and spills the upper boulders in the sun, and makes gaps even two can pass abreast. The work of hunters is another thing. I have come after them and made repair, where they have left not one stone on a stone. They would have the rabbit out of hiding, to please the yelping dogs, the gaps I mean. No one has seen them made or heard them made, but at spring mending time we find them there. I let my neighbor know beyond the hill, and on a day we meet to walk the line and set the wall between us once again. We keep the wall between us as we go, to each the boulders that have fallen to each, and some are loaves, and some so nearly balls. We have to use a spell to make them balance. Stay where you are until our backs are turned. We wear our fingers rough with handling them. Oh, just another kind of outdoor game, one on a side. It comes to little more. There, where it is we do not need the wall. He is all pine, and I am apple orchard. My apple trees will never get across, and eat the cones under his pines, I tell him. He only says, good fences make good neighbors. Spring is the mischief in me, and I wonder if I could put a notion in his head. Why do they make good neighbors? Isn't it where there are no cows? But here there are no cows. Before I built a wall, I'd ask to know what I was walling in or walling out, and to whom I was like to give offense. Something there is that doesn't love a wall, that's, that wants it down. I could say elves to him, but it's not elves exactly, and I'd rather he said it for himself. I see him there, bringing a stone grasped firmly by the top, in each hand, like an old stone savage armed. He moves in darkness, as it seems to me, not of woods only, and the shade of trees. He will not go beyond his father's saying, and he likes having thought of it so well. He says again, good fences make good neighbors. Fire and ice. Some say the world will end in fire, some say in ice. From what I've tasted of desire, I hold with those who favor fire. But if it had to perish twice, I think I know enough of hate to say that for destruction ice is also great and would suffice. Stopping by woods on a snowy evening. Whose woods these are, I think I know. His house is in the village, though. He will not see me stopping here to watch his woods fill up with snow. My little horse must think it queer to stop without a farmhouse near, between the woods and frozen lake, the darkest evening of the year. He gives his harness bells a shake to ask if there is some mistake. The only other sounds the sweep of easy wind and downy flake. The woods are lovely, dark and deep, but I have promises to keep, and miles to go before I sleep, and miles to go before I sleep. Next up, we have some Edgar Allan Poe. The Mask of the Red Death. The Red Death had long devastated the country. No pestilence had ever been so fatal or so hideous. Blood was its avatar and its seal. The redness and the horror of blood. There were sharp pains and sudden dizziness, and then profuse bleedings at the pores with disillusion. The scarlet stains upon the body and especially upon the face of the victim were the pest ban which shut him out from the aid and from the sympathy of his fellow men. And the whole seizure, progress, and termination of the disease were the incidents of half an hour. But the Prince Prospero was happy and dauntless and sagacious. When his dominions were half depopulated, he summoned to his presence 1,000 hale and light-hearted friends from among the knights and dames of his court, and with these retired to the deep seclusion of one of his castellated abbeys. This was an extensive and magnificent structure, the creation of the prince's own eccentric yet august taste. A strong and lofty wall girdled it in. This wall had gates of iron. The courtiers, having entered, brought furnaces and massy hammers and welded the bolts. They resolved to leave means neither of ingress or egress to the sudden impulses of despair from without or of frenzy from within. The abbey was amply provisioned. With such precautions, the courtiers might bid defiance to contagion. The external world could take care of itself. In the meantime, It was folly to grieve or to think. The prince had provided all the appliances of pleasure. There were buffoons, there were improvisatory, there were ballet dancers, there were musicians, there were cards, there was beauty, there was wine. All these and security were within, without was the Red Death. It was towards the close of the 5th or 6th month of his seclusion, and while the pestilence raged most furiously abroad, that the Prince Prospero entertained his 1,000 friends at a masked ball of the most unusual magnificence. It was a voluptuous scene, that masquerade. But first, let me tell you of the rooms in which it was held. There were 7, an imperial suite. In many palaces, however, such suites form a long and straight vista, while the folding doors slide back nearly to the walls on either hand, so that the view of the whole extent is scarcely impeded. Here the case was very different, as might have been expected from the Duke's love of the bizarre. The apartments were so irregularly disposed that the vision embraced but little more than one at a time. There was a sharp turn at every 20 or 30 yards, and at each turn a novel effect. To the right and left, in the middle of each wall, a tall and narrow Gothic window looked out upon a closed corridor which pursued the windings of the suite. These windows were of stained glass whose color varied in accordance with the prevailing hue of the decorations of the chamber into which it opened. That at the eastern extremity was hung, for example, in blue, and vividly blue were its windows. The second chamber was purple in its ornaments and tapestries, and here the panes were purple. The third was green throughout, and so were the casements. The fourth was furnished and litten with orange, the 5th with white, the 6th with violet. The 7th apartment was closely shrouded in black velvet tapestries that hung all over the ceiling and down the walls, falling in heavy folds upon a carpet of the same material and hue. But in this chamber only, the color of the windows failed to correspond with the decorations. The panes here were scarlet, a deep blood color. Now, in no one of the 7 apartments was there any lamp or candelabrum, amid the profusion of golden ornaments that lay scattered to and fro, or depended from the roof. There was no light of any kind emanating from lamp or candle within the suite of chambers. But in the corridors that followed the suite, there stood, opposite to each window, a heavy tripod, bearing a brazier of fire that projected its rays through the tinted glass, and so glaringly illumined the room. And thus were produced a multitude of gaudy and fantastic appearances. But in the western or black chamber, the effect of the firelight that streamed upon the dark hangings through the blood-tinted panes was ghastly in the extreme, and produced so wild a look upon the countenances of those who entered, that there were few of the company bold enough to set foot within its precincts at all. It was in this apartment, also, that there stood against the western wall a gigantic clock of ebony. Its pendulum swung to and fro with a dull, heavy, monotonous clang, and when its minute hand made the circuit of the face, and the hour was to be stricken, there came forth from the brazen lungs of the clock a sound which was clear and loud and deep and exceedingly musical. but of so peculiar a note and emphasis that at each lapse of an hour the musicians in the orchestra were constrained to pause momentarily in their performance to hearken the sound, and thus the waltzers perforce ceased their evolutions, and there was a brief disconcert of the whole gay company, and while the chimes of the clock yet rang, it was observed that the giddiest grew pale, and that the more aged and sedate passed their hands over their brows as if in confused reverie or meditation. But when the echoes had fully ceased, a light laughter at once pervaded the assembly. The musicians looked at each other and smiled as if at their own nervousness and folly, and made whispering vows, each to the other, that the next chiming of the clock should produce in them no similar emotion. And then, after the lapse of 60 minutes, which embraced 3,600 seconds of the time that flies, there came yet another chiming of the clock, and then were the same disconcert and tremulousness and meditation as before. But, in spite of these things, it was a gay and magnificent revel. The tastes of the Duke were peculiar. He had a fine eye for colors and effects. He disregarded the decora of mere fashion. His plans were bold and fiery, and his conceptions glowed with barbaric luster. There are some who would have thought him mad. His followers felt that he was not. It was necessary to hear and see and touch him to be sure that he was not. He had directed in great part the movable embellishments of the seven chambers on occasions of this great feat, and it was his own guiding taste which had given character to the costumes of the masqueraders. Be sure they were grotesque. There were much glare and glitter and piquancy and phantasm, much of what has been seen in Hernani. There were arabesque figures with unsuited limbs and appointments. There were delirious fancies, such as the madman fashions. There was much of the beautiful, much of the wanton, much of the bizarre, something of the terrible, and not a little of that which might have excited disgust. To and fro in the seven chambers there stalked, in fact, a multitude of dreams, and these, the dreams, writhed in and about, taking hue from the rooms, and causing the wild music of the orchestra to seem as the echo of their steps, and anon there strikes the ebony clock which stands in the hall of the velvet, and then, momentarily, all is still, and all is silent save the voice of the clock. The dreams are stiff frozen as they stand, but the echoes of the chime die away. They have endured but an instant, and a light, half subdued laughter floats after them as they depart. And now again the music swells, and their dreams live and writhe to and fro more merrily than ever, taking hue from the many tinted windows through which stream the rays from the tripods. But to the chamber which lies most westwardly of the seven there are now none of the maskers who venture, for the night is waning away, and there flows a ruddier light through the blood-colored panes, and the blackness of the sable drapery appalls, and to him whose foot falls upon the sable carpet there comes from the near clock of ebony a muffled peal more solemnly emphatic than any which reaches their ears who indulge in the more remote gaieties of the other apartments. That certainly would be a fun way to find out that you're colorblind. These other apartments were densely crowded. and in them beat feverishly the heart of life. And the revel went whirlingly on, until at length was sounded the 12th hour upon the clock. And then the music ceased, as I have told, and the evolutions of the waltzers were quieted, and there was an uneasy cessation of all things as before. But now there were 12 strokes to be sounded by the bell of the clock, and thus it happened, perhaps, that more of thought crept, with more of time, into the meditations of the thoughtful among those who revelled. And thus again it happened, perhaps, that before the last echoes of the last chime had utterly sunk into silence, there were many individuals in the crowd who had found leisure to become aware of the presence of a masked figure which had arrested the attention of no single individual before. And the rumor of this new presence having spread itself whisperingly around, there arose at length from the whole company a buzz or murmur, expressive at first of disapprobation and surprise, then, finally, of terror, of horror, and of disgust. In an assembly of phantasms such as I have painted, it may well be supposed that no ordinary appearance could have excited such sensation. In truth, the masquerade license of the night was nearly unlimited, but the figure in question had out-Heroded Herod and gone beyond the bounds of even the prince's indefinite decorum. There are chords in the hearts of the most reckless which cannot be touched without emotion, even with the utterly lost, to whom life and death are equally jests. There are matters of which no jest can be properly made. The whole company, indeed, seemed now deeply to feel that in the costume and bearing of the stranger neither wit nor propriety existed. The figure was tall and gaunt, and shrouded from head to foot in the habiliments of the grave. The mask which concealed the visage was made so nearly to resemble the countenance of a stiffened corpse that the closest scrutiny must have had difficulty in detecting the cheat. And yet, all this might have been endured, if not approved, by the mad revellers around. But the mummer had gone so far as to assume the type of the Red Death. His vesture was dabbled in blood, and his broad brow, with all the features of the face, was besprinkled with the scarlet horror. When the eyes of the Prince Prospero fell upon this spectral image, which, with a slow and solemn movement, as if more fully to sustain its role, stalked to and fro among the waltzers, he was seen to be convulsed, in the first moment, with a strong shudder either of terror or distaste, but, in the next, his brow reddened with rage. Yeah, this story always kind of made me think of Majora's Mask, since it's, so mask focused. Who dares, he demanded hoarsely of the group that stood around him, who dares thus to make mockery of our woes? Uncase the varlet, that we may know whom we have to hang tomorrow at sunrise from the battlements. Will no one stir at my bidding? Stop him, and strip him, I say, of those reddened vestures of sacrilege. It was in the eastern or blue chamber in which stood the Prince Prospero as he uttered these words. They rang throughout the 7 rooms loudly and clearly. But the prince was a bold and robust man, and the music had become hushed at the waving of his hand. It was in the blue room where stood the prince, with a group of pale courtiers by his side. At first, as he spoke, there was a slight rushing movement of this group in the direction of the intruder, who at the moment was also near at hand, and now, with deliberate and stately step, made closer approach to the speaker, but from a certain nameless awe with which the mad assumptions of the mummer had inspired the whole party, there were found none who put forth hand to seize him, so that, unimpeded, he passed within a yard of the prince's person, and, while the vast assembly, as if with one impulse, shrank from the centers of the rooms to the walls, he made his way, uninterruptedly, but with the same solemn and measured step which had distinguished him from the first, through the blue chamber, to the purple, through the purple to the green, through the green to the orange, through this again to the white, and even thence to the violet. Ere a decided movement had been made to arrest him. It was then, however, that the Prince Prospero, maddening with rage and the shame of his own momentary cowardice, rushed hurriedly through the 6 chambers, while none followed him on account of a deadly terror that had seized upon all. He bore aloft a drawn dagger, and had approached in rapid impetuosity to within 3 or 4 feet of the retreating figure, when the latter, having attained to the extremity of the velvet apartment, turned suddenly round and confronted his pursuer. There was a sharp cry, and the dagger dropped gleaming upon the sable carpet, upon which instantly afterwards fell prostrate in death the Prince Prospero. Then, summoning the wild courage of despair, a throng of the revellers at once threw themselves into the black apartment and, seizing the mummer, whose tall figure stood erect and motionless within the shadow of the ebony clock, gasped in unutterable horror at finding the grave cerements and corpse-like mask which they had handled with so violent a rudeness, untenanted by any tangible form. And now was acknowledged the presence of the Red Death. He had come like a thief in the night, and one by one dropped the revellers in the blood-bedewed halls of their revel, and died each in the despairing posture of his fall, and the life of the ebony clock went out with that of the last of the gay, and the flames of the tripods expired, and darkness and decay and the Red Death held illimitable dominion over all. Prospero's castle mansion could be a law's dungeon. That's fair. I could definitely see it. Cool. It is a beauteous evening, calm and free, by William Wordsworth. It is a beauteous evening, calm and free. The holy time is quiet as a nun. Breathless with adoration, the broad sun, sinking down in its tranquillity. The gentleness of heaven broods o'er the sea. Listen, the mighty being is awake, and doth with his eternal motion make a sound like thunder everlastingly. Dear child, dear girl, that walkest with me here, if thou appear untouched by solemn thought, thy nature is not therefore less divine. Thou liest in Abraham's bosom all the year, and worshipst at the temple's inner shrine, God being with thee when we know it not. After great pain a formal feeling comes, by Emily Dickinson. After great pain a formal feeling comes, the nerves sit ceremonious like tombs. The stiff heart questions, was it he that bore and yesterday or centuries before. The feet mechanical go round a wooden way, ground or air or aught, regardless grown, a court's contentment like a stone. This is the hour of lead, remembered if outlived, as freezing persons recollect the snow, first chill, then stupor, then the letting go. Snowflakes by Emily Dickinson. I counted till they danced so, their slippers leaped the town, and then I took a pencil to note the rebels down, and then they grew so jolly, I did resign the prig, and 10 of my once stately toes are marshalled for a jig. Fame is a Bee by Emily Dickinson. Fame is a bee. It has a song, it has a sting. Ah, too, it has a wing. I never hear that one is dead. I never hear that one is dead without the chance of life, afresh annihilating me, that mightiest belief. Too mighty for the daily mind, the tilling its abyss, had madness had it once or twice, the yawning consciousness. The leaves are bandaged like the tongue, when terror were it told, in any tone commensurate, would strike us instant dead. I do not know the man so bold, he dare in lonely place that awful stranger consciousness deliberately face. Auguries of Innocence by William Blake. To see a world in a grain of sand, and heaven in a wild flower, hold infinity in the palm of your hand, and eternity for an hour. A robin redbreast in a cage puts all heaven in a rage. A dove house filled with doves and pigeons shudders hell through all its regions. A dog starved at his master's gate predicts the ruin of the state. A horse misused upon the road calls to heaven for human blood. Each outcry of the hunted hare a fiber from the brain does tear. A skylark wounded in the wing. The cherubim does cease to sing. The gamecock clipped and armed for fight, does the rising sun affright. Every wolf's and lion's howl raises from hell a human soul. The wild deer, wandering here and there, keeps the human soul from care. The lamb misused breeds public strife, and yet forgives the butcher's knife. The bat that flits at close of eve has left the brain that won't believe. The owl that calls upon the night speaks the unbeliever's fright. He who shall hurt the little wren shall never be beloved by men. He who the ox to wrath has moved shall never be by woman loved. The wanton boy that kills the fly shall feel the spider's enmity. He who torments the chaffer's sprite weaves a bower in endless night. The caterpillar on the leaf repeats to thee thy mother's grief. Kill not the moth nor butterfly, for the last judgment draweth nigh. He who shall train the horse to war shall never pass the polar bar. The beggar's dog and widow's cat, feed them and thou wilt grow fat. The gnat that sings his summer song, poison gets from slander's tongue. The poison of the snake and newt is the sweat of envy's foot. The poison of the honey bee is the artist's jealousy. The prince's robes and beggar's rags are toadstools in the miser's bags. Truth that's told with bad intent beats all the lies you can invent. It is right, it should be so. Man was made for joy and woe. And when this world we rightly know, through the world we safely go. Joy and woe are woven fine, a clothing for the soul divine. Under every grief and pine. Hey Vasilius, how's it going? Hope you're having a good day or night or whatever it is for you. The babe is more than swaddling bands throughout all these human lands. Tools were made and born were hands. Every farmer understands. Every tear from every eye becomes a babe in eternity. This is caught by females bright and returned to its own delight. The bleat, the bark, bellow, and roar are waves that beat on heaven's shore. The babe that weeps the rod beneath writes revenge in realms of death. The beggar's rags fluttering in air does to rags the heavens tear. The soldier armed with sword and gun palsied strikes the summer's sun. The poor man's farthing is worth more than all the gold on Afric's shore. One mite wrung from the laborer's hands shall buy and sell the miser's lands, or if protected from on high, does the whole nation sell and buy. He who mocks the infant's death shall be mocked in he who mocks the infant's faith shall be mocked in age and death. He who shall teach the child to doubt, the rotting grave shall ne'er get out. He who respects the infant's faith triumphs over hell and death. The child's toys and the old man's reasons are the fruits of the two seasons. The questioner who sits so sly shall never know how to reply. He who replies to words of doubt doth put the light of knowledge out. The strongest poison ever known came from Caesar's laurel crown. Naught can deform the human race like the armor's iron brace. When gold and gems adorn the plough, to peaceful arts shall envy bow. A riddle or the cricket's cry is to doubt a fit reply. The emmet's inch and eagle's mile make lame philosophy to smile. He who doubts from what he sees will ne'er believe, do what you please. If the sun and moon should doubt, they'd immediately go out. To be in passion you good may do, but no good if a passion is in you. The whore and gambler by the state, licensed build that nation's fate. The harlot's cry from street to street shall weave old England's winding sheet. The winner's shout, the loser's curse, dance before dead England's hearse. Every night and every morn, some to misery are born. Every morn and every night, some are born to sweet delight. Some are born to sweet delight. Some are born to endless night. We are led to believe a lie, when we see not through the eye, which was born in a night to perish in a night, when the soul slept in beams of light. God appears and God is light to those poor souls who dwell in night, but does a human form display to those who dwell in realms of day. The Arrow and the Song by Henry Wadsworth Longfellow. I shot an arrow into the air. It fell to earth, I knew not where, for so swiftly it flew, the sight could not follow in its it could not follow it in its flight. I breathed the song into the air. It fell to earth, I knew not where. For who has sight so keen and strong that it can follow the flight of song? Long, long afterward, in an oak, I found the arrow still unbroke, and the song from beginning to end I found again in the heart of a friend. The Children's Hour by Henry Wadsworth Longfellow. Between the dark and daylight, when the night is beginning to lower, comes a pause in the day's occupations that is known as the children's hour. I hear in the chamber above me the patter of little feet, the sound of a door that is open, and voices soft and sweet. From my study I see in the lamplight, descending the broad hall stair, grave Alice and laughing Allegra, and Edith with golden hair. A whisper and then a silence, yet I know by their merry eyes they are plotting and planning together to take me by surprise. A sudden rush from the stairway, a sudden raid from the hall. By 3 doors left unguarded, they enter my castle wall. They climb up into my turret, over the arms and back of my chair. If I try to escape, they surround me. They seem to be everywhere. They almost devour me with kisses, their arms about me entwine. Till I think of the bishop by Ingen in his mouse tower on the Rhine. Do you think, O blue-eyed banditti, because you have scaled the wall, such an old mustache as I am, is not a match for you all? I have you fast in my fortress, and will not let you depart, but put you down in the dungeon, in the round tower of my heart. And there will I keep you forever, yes, forever and a day, for the walls shall crumble to ruin, and molder in dust away. Not until you try to read a bunch of your favorite poems out loud that you realize that you don't know how to pronounce multiple words in it because you never needed to pronounce it out loud. Alright, this is our last long poem for the night. The Building of the Ship by Henry Wadsworth Longfellow. Build me straight, O worthy master, stanch and strong, a goodly vessel that shall laugh at all disaster, and with wave and whirlwind wrestle. The merchant's word delighted the master heard, for his heart was in his work, and the heart giveth grace unto every art. A quiet smile played round his lips, as the eddies and dimples of the tide lay round the bows of ships that steadily at anchor ride. And with a voice that was full of glee, he answered, ere long we will launch a vessel as godly and strong and staunch as ever weathered a wintry sea. And first, with nicest skill and art, perfect and finished in every part, a little model the master wrought, which should be to the longer plan what the child is to the man, its counterpart in miniature, that with a hand more swift and sure, the greater labor might be brought to answer to his inward thought. And as he labored, his mind ran o'er the various ships that were built of yore, and above them all, and strongest of all, and strangest of all, towered the great Harry, crank and tall, whose picture was hanging on the wall, with bows and stern raised high in the air, and balconies hanging here and there, and signal lanterns and flags afloat, and 8 round towers like those that frown from some old castle looking down upon the drawbridge and the moat. And he said with a smile, our ship, I wis, shall be of another form than this. It was of another form indeed, built for freight and yet for speed, a beautiful and gallant craft, broad in the beam that the stress of the blast, pressing down upon sail and mast, might not the sharp bows overwhelm, broad in the beam, but sloping aft, with graceful curve and slow degrees, that she might be docile to the helm, and that the currents of parted seas, closing behind with mighty force, might aid and not impede her course. In the shipyard stood the master, with the model of the vessel, that should laugh at all disaster, and with wave and whirlwind wrestle, covering many a rood of ground, lay the timber piled around, timber and chestnut and elm and oak, and scattered here and there with these, the gnarled and crooked cedar knees, brought from regions far away, from Pascagoula's sunny bay, and the banks of the roaring Roanoke. Ah, what a wondrous thing it is to note how many wheels of toil one thought, one word can set in motion. There's not a ship that sails the ocean, but every climate, every soil, must bring its tribute, great or small, and help to build the wooden wall. The sun was rising over the sea, and long the level shadows lay, as if they too, the beams would be, of some great airy argosy, framed and launched in a single day, that silent architect, the sun, had hewn and laid them every one, ere the work of man was yet begun. Beside the master, when he spoke, a youth against an anchor leaning, listened to catch his slightest meaning. Only the long waves as they broke in ripples on the pebbly beach interrupted the old man's speech. Beautiful they were, in sooth, the old man and the fiery youth, the old man in whose busy brain many a ship that sailed the main was modelled o'er and o'er again. Fiery youth who was to be the heir of his dexterity, the heir of his house and his daughter's hand, when he had built and launched from land what the elder head had planned. Thus, said he, will we build this ship, lay square the blocks upon the slip, and follow well this plan of mine. Choose the timbers with greatest care, of all that is unsound beware, for only what is sound and strong to this vessel shall belong. Cedar of Maine and Georgia pine here together shall combine, a goodly frame and a goodly fame, and the union be her name. For the day that gives her to the sea shall give my daughter unto thee. The master's word enraptured the young man heard, and as he turned his face aside, with a look of joy and a thrill of pride, standing before her father's door, he saw the form of his promised bride, The sun shone on her golden hair, and her cheek was glowing fresh and fair, with the breath of morn and the soft sea air. Like a beauteous bard she was, still at rest on the sandy beach, just beyond the billows' reach. But he was the restless, seething, stormy sea. Ah, how skilful grows the hand that obeyeth love's command. It is the heart and not the brain that to the highest doth attain, and he who followeth love's behest far excelleth all the rest. Thus with the rising of the sun was the noble task begun, and soon throughout the shipyard's bounds were head to intermingled sounds of axes and of mallets plied, with vigorous arms on every side, plied so deftly and so well that ere the shadows of evening fell, the keel of oak for a noble ship, scarfed and bolted straight and strong, was lying ready and stretched along, the blocks well placed upon the slip. Happy, thrice happy, every one who sees his labor well begun, and not perplexed and multiplied by idly waiting for time and tide. And when the hot long day was o'er, the young man at the master's door sat with the maiden calm and still, and within the porch a little more, removed beyond the evening chill, the father sat and told them tales of wrecks in the great September gales, of pirates coasting the Spanish main, and ships that never came back again. The chance and change of a sailor's life, want and plenty, rest and strife, his roving fancy like the wind, that nothing can stay and nothing can bind, and the magic charm of foreign lands, with shadows of palms and shining sands, where the tumbling surf o'er the coral reefs of Madagascar washes the feet of the swarthy Lascar as he lies alone and asleep on the turf. As the trembling maiden held her breath at the tales of that awful, pitiless sea, with all its terror and mystery, the dim, dark sea, so like unto death, that divides and yet unites mankind, and whenever the old man paused, a gleam from the bowl of his pipe would a while illume the silent group in the twilight gloom, and thoughtful faces as in a dream, and for a moment one might mark what had been hidden by the dark, that the head of the maiden lay at rest tenderly on the young man's breast. Day by day the vessel grew, with timbers fashioned strong and true, stimson and keelson and sternson knee, till, framed with perfect symmetry, the skeleton ship rose up to view, and around the bows and along the side the heavy hammers and mallets plied, till after many a week, at length, wonderful for form and strength, sublime in its enormous bulk, loomed aloft the shadowy hulk, and around its columns of smoke upbreathing rose from the boiling, bubbling, seething cauldron that glowed and overflowed with the black tar heated for the sheathing. And amid the clamors of clattering hammers, he who listened heard now and then song of the master and his men. Build me, O straight, O worthy master, staunch and strong, a goodly vessel, that shall laugh at all disaster, and with wave and whirlwind wrestle. With oaken brace and copper band lay the rudder on the sand, that, like a thought, should have control over the movement of the whole. And near it the anchor whose giant hand would reach down and grapple with the land, and immovable and fast hold the great ship against the bellowing blast. And at the bow as an image stood, by a cunning artist carved in wood, with robes of white that far behind seemed to be fluttering in the wind. It was not shaped in a classic mold, not like a nymph or goddess of old, or naiad rising from the water, but modeled from the master's daughter. On many a dreary and misty night, will be seen by the rays of the signal light, speeding along through the rain and the dark, like a ghost in its snow-white sark, the pilot of some phantom bark, guiding the vessel in its flight by a path none other knows aright. Behold, at last, each tall and tapering mast is swung into its place, shrouds and stays holding it firm and fast. Long ago, in the deer-haunted forests of Maine, when upon mountain and plain lay the snow, they fell, those lordly pines, those grand majestic pines. Mid shouts and cheers, the jaded steers, panting beneath the goad, dragged down the weary winding road, those captive kings so straight and tall, to be shorn of their streaming hair, and naked and bare, to feel the stress and the strain of the wind and the reeling main, whose roar would remind them forevermore of their native forest they should not see again. And everywhere, the slender, graceful spars poise aloft in the air, and at the masthead, white, blue, and red, a flag unrolls the stripes and stars. Ah, when the wanderer, lonely, friendless, in foreign harbors shall behold that flag unrolled, 'twill be as a friendly hand stretched out from his native land, filling his heart with memories sweet and endless. All is finished, and at length has come the bridal day of beauty and of strength, the day the vessel shall be launched. With fleecy clouds the sky is blanched, and o'er the bay, slowly in his splendors dight, the great sun rises to behold the sight. The ocean old, centuries old, strength as use and as uncontrolled, paces restless to and fro, up and down the sands of gold. His beating heart is not at rest, and far and wide, with ceaseless flow, his beard of snow heaves with the heaving of his breast. He waits impatient for his bride. There she stands, with her foot upon the sands, decked with flags and streamers gay, in honor of her marriage day. Her snow-white signals fluttering, blending, round her like a veil descending, ready to be the bride of the grey old sea. On the deck another bride is standing by her lover's side, shadows from the flags and shrouds, like the shadows cast by clouds, broken by many a sunny fleck, fall around them on the deck. The prayer is said, the service read, the joyous bridge room bows his head, and in tears the good old master shakes the brown hand of his son, kisses his daughter's glowing cheek, in silence for he cannot speak, and ever faster down his own the tears begin to run. The worthy pastor, the shepherd of that wandering flock, that has the ocean for its wold, that has the vessel for its fold, leaping ever from rock to rock, spake with accents mild and clear, words of warning, words of cheer, but tedious to the bridegroom's ear. He knew the chart of the sailor's heart, all its pleasures and its griefs, all its shallows and rocky reefs, all those secret currents that flow with under, such resistless undertow, and lift and drift with terrible force the will from its moorings and its course. Therefore he spoke, and thus said he, like unto ships far off at sea, outward or homeward bound are we, before, behind, and all around, floats and swings the horizon's bound. seems at its distant rim to rise and climb the crystal wall of the skies, and then again to turn and sink, as if we could slide from its outer brink. Ah, it is not the sea, it is not the sea that sinks and shelves, but ourselves that rock and rise with endless and uneasy motion, now touching the very skies, now sinking into the depths of the ocean. Ah, if our if our souls would poise and swing like the compass in its brazen ring, ever level and ever true, the toil and the task we have to do, we shall sail securely and safely reach the fortunate isles on whose shining beach sights we see and the sounds we wear will be those of joy and not of fear. Then the master, with a gesture of command, waved his hand, and at a word, loud and sudden, there was heard, all around them and below, the sound of hammers, blow on blow, knocking away the shores and spurs, and see, she stirs, she starts, she moves, she seems to feel the thrill of life along her keel, and spurning with her foot the ground, with one exulting joyous bound, she leaps into the ocean's arms. And lo, from the assembled crowd, there rose a shout prolonged and loud, that to the ocean seemed to say, take her, O bridegroom, old and grey, take her to thy protecting arms, with all her youth and all her charms. How beautiful she is, how fair, she lies within those arms that press her form with many a soft caress of tenderness and watchful care. Sail forth into the sea, O ship, through wind and wave, right onward steer. The moistened eye, the trembling lip, are not the signs of doubt or fear. Sail forth into the sea of life, O gentle, loving, trusting wife, and safe from all adversity, upon the bosom of that sea. Thy comings and thy goings be, for gentleness and love and trust prevail o'er angry wave and gust. And in the wreck of noble lives, something immortal still survives. Thou too sail on, O ship of state, sail on, O Union strong and great. Humanity, with all its fears, with all the hopes of future years, is hanging breathless on thy fate. We know what master laid thy keel, what workman wrought thy ribs of steel, who made each mast and sail and rope, what anvils rang, what hammers beat, and what a forge and what a heat were shaped the anchors of thy hope. Fear not each sudden sound and shock, 'tis of the wave and not the rock, 'tis but the flapping of the sail, and not a rent made by the gale, in spite of rock and tempest roar, in spite of false lights on the shore. Sail on, nor fear to breast the sea, our hearts, our hopes are all with thee. Our hearts, our hopes, our our hearts, our hopes, our praise, our tears, our faith triumphant o'er our fears, are all with thee, are all with thee. All right. Dirty Face by Shel Silverstein. Where did you get such a dirty face, my darling dirty-faced child? I got it from crawling along in the dirt and biting 2 buttons off Jeremy's shirt. I got it from chewing the roots of a rose and digging for clams in the yard with my nose. I got it from peeking into a dark cave and painting myself like a Navajo brave. I got it from playing with coal in the bin and signing my name in cement with my chin. I got it from rolling around on the rug and giving the horrible dog a big hug. I got it from finding a lost silver mine and eating sweet blackberries right off the vine. I got it from ice cream and wrestling in tears and from having more fun than you've had in years. last thing we're gonna do is one of my favorite Homestuck pages because I just think it's nice. And then we'll find some other person doing ASMR to raid. The streets are empty. Wind skims the voids, keeping neighbors apart as if grazing the hollow of a cut reed, or say, a plundered mailbox. A familiar note is produced. It's the one desolation plays to keep its instrument in tune. It is your 13th birthday, and as with all 12 preceding it, something feels missing from your life. The game presently eluding you is only the latest sleight of hand in the repertoire of an unseen Riddler, one to engender a sense not of mirth, but of lack. His coarse schemes are those less of a prankster than a common pickpocket. His riddle is absence itself. It is a mystery dispersing altogether, like the moon's faint reflection, with even one pebble of inquiry dropped in its black well. It is the most diabolical riddle of all. Absence diminishes little passions and increases great ones, as wind extinguishes candles and fans a fire. Walt Whitman. Yes, you are certain Walt Whitman said that. 100% positive. You have a feeling it's going to be a long day. All right. And with that, I guess we will go try to find somebody to raid. Hope that was relaxing for all of you guys. I hope you couldn't hear my roommates too much. They are very loud. Let's see. Mm-hmm. Sylvie and V are did streaming, but they're definitely not going to be quiet. Oops. Let's go searching for ASMR. Oh, there we go. Nice. Right there. That's good. I'm glad. This. What are you doing? Hmm. I have to actually find people. Boy, there sure are a lot of people who are just basically doing porn. Okay, we're just gonna raid this person. They're like the only person that I can find that doesn't seem to just be straight up doing some loot shit. So yeah. Thank you guys for coming out. Next time I do one of these, I might read a book instead of just doing a bunch of poetry. I don't really know, but we will see when that time comes. So until then, well, I guess we'll do the raid message. Uh, hmm, change it up a little. Bam. Okay. Yeah, I kind of figured that was the case. You know what? I guess I'll just change it to this then. Uh, well, you can buy one of the other ones. It's whatever one you want, or you can just do whatever. I don't really care. I just like that emote. Anyway, thank you guys for coming out. Have a good day, good night, whatever it is for you. And yeah, I'll see you all in the next stream. Mwah.